Now, the Defence Force's illegally procured interferon COVID drug is on its way back to Cuba. The ministerial task team probing the matter found that even if the SANDF was allowed to use it in a clinical trial, most of it would expire before then. This was all at a cost of 260 million rand. eNCA reporter Lindsay Dentlinger following that story for us and joining us live from Cape Town. Good afternoon, Lindsay. So how did it come about that the Defence Force thought it was a good idea to buy almost 1 million vials of this drug?
So we heard, Dan, that the Surgeon General of the SANDF was in Cuba on unrelated business, if I can call it that. He was there to iron out issues related to medical qualifications for students that are studying there. And that's when he was introduced to this drug and told at the time, as you will recall, way before the pandemic hit here in South Africa and before there was a vaccine, that this immune booster could do marvels for the Defence Force in terms of keeping them safe and healthy in the event that they were deployed out in communities to manage the lockdown and during this pandemic. And it was that information that was brought back to South Africa, brought back to SANDF officials to discuss possibly procuring this drug. Who exactly and advised the Defence Force as to how many of these vials to buy, that remains unclear from the investigation by this task team, but they say that they did not intentionally mean to break as many laws as they did, among those bringing in not only a drug that is not registered for use in South Africa, but Dan, also bringing it in via Waterkloof Air Force Base, which is not a accepted legal port of entry for medication into South Africa. So these are some of the findings that the task team appointed by Minister Thandi Modise have found, although they say reports are untrue that the drug was not being stored correctly in South Africa, and because, as you said earlier, the drugs would probably expire before they could be used, if at all. SAPRA gave them the go-ahead to conduct a clinical trial. It was the task team's recommendation that at least 500,000 of those vials be sent back to Cuba.
Talk about smuggling. It's like an attempted smuggling of something so serious. So how was this illegal expenditure explained? I mean, nobody approved this from what you've said. And what is the task team recommending be done now?
So unfortunately, we didn't get much in by way of answers or responses to this task team's findings for a number of reasons. Firstly, Minister Thandi Modise, due to ill health, not able to attend today's meeting, and so also that full report not tabled before the committee, although there are promises that it will eventually be made public. And so the task team really just giving us the highlights, as it were, and then the committee not wanting to entertain too much back and forth. We got the sense that SAPRA has a lot to say about these findings, and saying some of the things are the way they were portrayed today not true, including that it had refused the SANDF a clinical trial, but was saying rather that they weren't given enough scientific evidence to allow a clinical trial to proceed. And as you recall, SAPRA warned that they would destroy those drugs if they weren't sent back. And so just to answer your question quickly on the irregular expenditure, the task team did indeed find that the SANDF did ignore Treasury when Treasury said absolutely not, you're not allowed to buy the drug. They went ahead anyway, and they did it under old bilateral agreements that South Africa has with Cuba, and that is how they attempted to bring that in. How exactly and whether money is now going to be recouped for those drugs being sent back, we also don't have an answer to at this time. And it was only after a nearly 2.5 hour long meeting that we learned right at the very end that in fact the drug has now been sent back to Cuba. So the details related to that return in terms of recouping some of that money of that irregular expenditure, we will have to wait for a follow-up meeting of this committee and for the Defence Minister to be present for some of those questions to be answered, Dan.